Let's talk about Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Secret of the Last Supper. The autumn of 1495, in the city of Milan, a strange man climbed a wooden scaffold in the dining hall of a quiet monastery and stood there, staring at a blank wall for hours without lifting a brush. The monks who lived there had grown used to it. His name was Leonardo da Vinci, and he was famous, even then, for two very different things: astonishing genius and never quite finishing anything. He designed flying machines that never flew, war engines that were never built, and paintings that sat half done for years. So when the Duke of Milan, a proud and image-hungry man named Ludovico Sforza, asked Leonardo to paint the Last Supper on the wall of this factory, the monks braced themselves for a very long wait. They didn't know they were about to watch him invent something the world had never seen. Every painter before Leonardo had told this story the same safe way. Jesus and his 12 apostles stood for their final meal, sitting calmly in a row, clothes glowing, bread being quietly passed down the table. It was less a moment than a photograph of these. Nothing was happening because nothing was supposed to happen. It was a symbol, not a scene. Leonardo climbed his scaffold and thought about one single sentence from the Gospels instead. The sentence Jesus says right before that peaceful moment: "One of you will betray me." That was the second he decided to paint, not the calm after the shockwave itself. Can you imagine 13 men sitting shoulder to shoulder, and one terrible sentence dropped into the middle of them like a stone into still water? And then he did something no one had dared before. He gave every single one of them a different reaction. One apostle recoils, hand pressed to his own chest, as the accusation had struck him physically. Two lean toward each other, whispering, eyes wide. One slams fist on the table. One points at his own heart. "Please, you don't mean me?" Another points to the ceiling, appealing to heaven itself. Down at the end, one man leans so far back in shock he nearly tips out the frame. Then in the middle of all that noise sits Christ, hands, with eyes lowered, utterly still, the only calm thing in, room full of panic. Leonardo had spent years secretly studying corpses in the middle of the night, dissecting them by sunlight to understand exactly how a muscle pulls mouth into fear or grief or disbelief. Now, for the first time, he poured all of that anatomical obsession into a religious painting, and by doing it, he turned a bowl meant for quiet prayer into something closer to a frozen photograph of the worst moment of 13. He built the room itself like a trap for the eye. The apostles sat in 4 small clusters of 3, each cluster its own little burst of drama, so that a person eating dinner beneath the painting could look from group to group like reading a story left to right. Every beam in the painted ceiling, every edge of every tapestry, every line of the table was aimed like an arrow at one single point, Christ's temple. So mathematics disguises faith. No matter where you stood in that long stone hall, your eyes were pulled gently and inevitably to the one man in the room who wasn't moving. Leonardo went further still. He painted the ceiling and walls of the fictional room to match the real ceiling walls of the actual refectory, so that when the monks sat down to eat their own quiet meals, the painted room seemed to continue on as if Christ and his apostles were seated at the very next table, forever finishing a meal that never quite ended. Hidden among the apostles in the same crowded row as everyone else sat the man every viewer searched for first. Judas. The painters made this easy. They simply sat Judas alone on the opposite side of the table so no one could mistake him. Leonardo thought that was, a real traitor doesn't sit at his own private tub announcing himself. So he hid Judas in plain sight, third seat from Christ, folded into the crowd like anyone else. Look closely, and the painting still whispers his secret. Judas leans back into shadow while the light falls on everyone around him. His right hand grips a small purse, the price of his betrayal. Pulled close, glints his body as if he's already trying to hide it. To near his elbow, a small salt cellar tips, spilling it. Intends across the table an old superstition of bad luck and broken trust. Though whether Leonardo intended that tiny detail or history simply arranged itself into a good story afterward, no one can say for certain. There's a legend, probably invented, but too good not to tell, that the head of the monastery grew so impatient watching Leonardo work agonizingly slowly that he complained to the Duke himself. Leonardo Lloyd is said to have snapped back that he was still searching Milan's roughest streets for a face quick enough to be Judas, and that if the prior kept nagging him, he wouldn't need to search any further. True or not, it captures something real. Leonardo really did wander the city hunting for faces. One cruel enough for the traitor, one pure enough for Christ, a face he reportedly never felt he found, and so he left unfinished because of it. Leonardo's genius came with a price, and it very clearly erased the painting entirely. Full paintings of the time were done in true fresco, pigment brushed onto wet plaster so that as the wall dried, the color fused permanently into the stone. It was durable but merciless. An artist had to work in a rush in small sections before the plaster dried, with no chance to go back and soften a shadow or rework an eye. Leonardo, who never liked being rushed by anything, fused that method. He wanted to paint slowly, the way you painted on wood panels, layering, blending, turning to a single sleeve days later to get the fold of the fabric exactly right. So he invented his own technique, sealing the drywall first, then painting on top of it as though it were a canvas. It was brilliant. It was also a mistake. Within 20 years, the paint never truly fused to. Thrown away fresco began to flake, bubble, and drop away in silent little pieces. A visitor, a few decades later, already described the once good painting as ruined. A doorway was later cut straight through the bottom of the wall, slicing off 2 feet entirely. Humidity from a neighboring kitchen crept into the plaster. Restorer after restorer for centuries painted over the damage with their hands until, by some estimates, only a fifth of what remained on that wall by the 20th century was actually Leonardo's own brushwork. Painstaking restoration finishing in 1999 stripped away as many of those centuries of overpainting as could be safely removed, revealing what little of the original truly survived beneath, fainter, paler, and footed than the version generations had grown used to, but closer at last to what Leonardo had actually painted. In a strange way, the painting's fragility became part of the story itself. What survives today isn't really finished, not the way Leonardo meant it to be. It's a faint echo of an experiment that very nearly failed completely, and every person who stands before it now is really looking at the last whisper of something that started disappearing almost the moment it was. Over the centuries, people have layered their own secrets onto Leonardo's secrets. A famous novel once claimed the youthful figure beside Christ wasn't the Apostle John at all, but a hidden Mary Magdalene, and that the space between their two bodies formed a secret letter M. It's a wonderful story and almost certainly untrue. Painting John as young and delicate was an ordinary convention of the time, not a hidden photo, and nothing in Leonardo's own notebooks or in the account from his lifetime supports the theory. But it says something about this painting that 5 centuries later, people are still searching it for secrets. Maybe that's because the real secret was never hidden at all. It was sitting right in the center of the whole time. 13 men, one terrible sentence, and for the first time in the history of painting, 13 completely different. Human ways of falling apart. That's what Leonardo actually left behind on that fragile wall in Milan. Not a diagram of faith, but a clear of fear, and it's still standing faintly 500 years later, waiting for anyone willing to look closely enough to find it. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Then you comment what part you like and what can I better. Bye.